My director is telling me it's time to get going. So,
Helper.
my helper. So, hi everyone, and I did.
Oh, you did. It's great.
Angela has a side. Last time we did this, I kept forgetting to switch the cameras, so I would talk for a long time while people looked at an empty workspace, and so we made Angela a sign to hold up for me. She's sitting across from me that says "switch camera," except there's a delay, so she's waving the card at me, and I already switched. So anyway, thank you for being here. Sorry for the last minute reschedule and the issues that we had last night. It was entirely my fault, no surprise there, but everything is working tonight. And we got a pretty good crowd. It looks like we've got close to 100 people online. We appreciate you being there. And so what we're going to talk about tonight is how we made these and how you can make them. And no surprise, the powder printer is involved, but it's a pretty cool technique. In fact, as we'll talk about, we released a whole new set of stencils for this particular process that we are referring to as glass powder filigree because it has that kind of delicate design, intricate design. And we're going to take you through the whole process tonight, how it works. I'll show you the new stuff that came out. And if you have questions, Angela is monitoring the chat. So go ahead and post your questions into the chat and she will throw something at me to get my attention. And we will, she goes, yeah. And we'll have some fun and show you some new stuff. So with that, switch to that view. We're going to put these aside. And I want to just kind of give you a very high level how this works, and then I'll show you in detail. The high level is we make a design with powder using the powder printer, and then we fire it, but a lot hotter than we would with a regular wafer. And we do some other things too, but what happens, this is all you're going to see is a product of surface tension. So with that, I want to talk first about one of the biggest challenges we had when doing this. You should see, if not on your screen, you will in a second, that there is a picture of a stencil. Can you see that on your screen yet?
Yeah.
Okay. And this is really just to illustrate why this is tough. And it's a challenge for some of the stencil we've done, and it became a real challenge for this particular technique. If you look at that image of that stencil, there's clearly a problem with it, which is that the centerpiece isn't connected to the stencil. So if you want to make a ring, and we're going to make lots of designs that have these kind of open spaces like rings. If you make a stencil like that, the middle piece is floating, it's free, and you could put a piece of tape on it and lift it up manually, but it really, it abandons all the benefit of the powder printer, which is easy picking up stencils, perfect registration, not having to worry about shaky hands, all that stuff. So you're going to see how we solve that. There's two different ways. And I'm going to show them both to you. So here is the powder printer. Here is a shelf. And the first way we solve the problem is find the right stencil. Is with a two-part stencil. I'm going to show you first how we did this design here. And this was the first one that we made. And there are two stencils for this. One looks, I'm going to try to get this so you can get a little bit of glare on it so you can see it. Hopefully you can see the design there. That is one stencil. And then this is the other one. And when you put them together, you can maybe see that design, but I'm going to show you because we'll go ahead and make one. We'll do this one first. Grab some powder. My little powder reclamation card there. This is my favorite bullseye color. It's called Magic Brown. It's all the extra powder that fell off other projects when they were being made and mixed together, and it comes out a lovely greenish brown. Not really lovely, but it's great for doing demonstrations and for tests and stuff. So we're going to go ahead. That's about it for that one. Now you can see there's the design. Now, the next stencil we want to put up is this one. But before we do that, because if I put it down now, the stencil is going to land on top of this powder and squish it down and distort it. So we're going to use a spacer. In the past, we have told folks to use their large rectangle as a spacer. And what we have found is that because the large rectangle is 5.5 inches square, which is the size of the largest design, then a lot of times the edge of the spacer hits what you're working on and just bumps it a little bit. So we are going to have new stencils dedicated just as spacers. They are a little bit larger so you don't bump into anything. And because I haven't had a chance to get these online yet, I will say that anybody, if you go in and you place any order before we get them online, which will probably be pretty soon, so if you order soon, we're going to just throw it in for free for any orders that include either powder printers or stencils over the next few days. Then we can put this one on top. And you can see these radial marks here. They are right above the powder, so the powder below is not squished. And there's our design. Now, how does that design become this? You're gonna have to hang out a bit before we show you. But anyway, that is, you can see we have now all those open spaces where normally if we tried to do this with a single stencil, we'd have little free-floating pieces. It would be obviously not any good at all for this design. So that is how one way we solve it. And we had 11 stencils come out. They went online last night, and the 11 stencils were all with filigree in mind, and only one of them had to be a 2-part stencil. Everything else we've done, we've been managed to make happen with a single stencil. So that's kind of exciting because I know that stencils can get expensive sometimes, and you'll only need one for most of these projects. So the next one I want to show you is how we did that one. Again, lots of circles. And believe it or not, let's see if there we go. So this stencil will actually make that design. And we refer to these, it's a whole new category of stencils called flip stencils. And I'm going to show you how that works. It's pretty cool. I'm going to go ahead and put it down for the first one. We're going to sift some powder over this one. Now, with flip stencils, one of the things I've been doing that's worked really well is I do the first stencil and I just do one layer of powder. Now I'm going to take the same spacer You ready for this? We're going to flip the stencil over, put that down. You ready? I think this is pretty cool. There's the design. Now, the way I have been doing these, it's worked really well on the flip ones, is I do a layer, the first one, I flip it, do a layer, and then I go back to the first position with the spacer, so that where there's a little bit of overlap, you can see where these two stencils, when it flips, it's not quite cut right down the middle. It overlaps a little bit, because if you don't, then when you fire the powder wafers, where the two parts meet, if there's not an overlap, it pulls apart as it shrinks a little bit. So we're going to go back like this. Again, one pass. Lift it up. Take it off, flip it over again. This way those overlaps are kind of interwoven so that when you fire them, they do not pull apart ever. One more. And there's our design. So we would take that wafer and we would go ahead and put it in the kiln as the next step and fire it. I generally fire these wafers when I'm doing the filigree technique a little bit cooler for the basic reason that I don't want it to distort at all. And I'm going to be adding more powder, so it's okay if it's a little bit thin. So a little bit cooler on the firing. It also cold works easier. Go grab something here. So let's say we go ahead and we fire that first one we did. Get this out of the way. And here's what that first one looked like when I did it in orange. Now, you can see, let me go ahead here. So you can all see, it's got a little bit of fuzz in the middle. It's not at all a problem. In fact, I want to show you how quickly we can clean these up. If you fire them a little bit lightly, it goes really fast. So, what? Yeah, you can do this. I generally, for this part, sometimes I'll hold it if it's done right. But the other thing is, of course, if you're not as comfortable holding these, the wafer workbench works great, and it significantly reduces the chances that you're going to break anything. So let's go ahead. Yeah, you want to put the flat side down. You can see this. It is very kind of rough on the back because of the different layers. That's okay. That's not going to be a problem. So, you see how quickly that goes? The advantage of firing a little bit softer, you got to be a little more careful, but they cold work super fast. I'm going to go through, bear with me while I go through and do this. Right, so you can see I've already done the outer ring. I'm going to go through and do the other rings real quick. Could you get me 329 for an orange? Now, in real life, I might take a little bit more time doing this, but not a lot. The stuff that falls outside the stencil is pretty soft.
How can someone order the spacer they ask?
So the spacer we're going to get online in the store in the next few days, and you'll be able to order it. But if you order any of the filigrees, if you order any stencils at all in the next few days before we get it online, or you order a powder printer, we will include it in your order.
What tool are you using?
This is a little diamond file. We recommend these for cleaning things up, the needle files. If you go to, on the Fusing Factory website, if you do a search on wafer workbench and go to the wafer workbench page, at the end of the description, there is a link to Amazon for a set. They're really cheap. You can get, I mean, we get a set like, one of these sets, I think is like 12 bucks.
Diamond file.
Yeah, they're diamond needle files.
Also, does the cooler firing impact gold bearing holes?
No, you'll be fine with gold bearing holds because you're going to be firing these again hotter. And since we're not going too hot, it shouldn't be an issue. It's honestly, it's the same kind of I mean, it's not that big a difference from the regular wafer problem. So it's no different than when using just wafers in general.
Val asked if you could demo this now because she's struggling with it, the peace sign.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, Val, when I get done with everything else, I will do the peace sign. All right, so that's the whole inside. Now I'm just going to watch how fast I take my flat one and I'm going to go around the edge. And you can actually hear it when they're fired right. There's a kind of, you probably can't on the mic, but it's a softer sound. It doesn't have the kind of ring that something more vitrified does. So there we are all set. Now, you could use this just like any wafer, but we're going to show you how to do the filigree. So we're done with that. Now, the next step is we are going to add more powder. I have used these before in these demos. These flower frogs, which are used for people who make arrangements of flowers, they're cheap and they're awesome for this next step, which is to hold the wafer up and add more powder. And because of it's got these needles, all the excess powder falls away, and so nothing piles up around the edge. And they come, you can get them in different shapes and sizes. I've actually got these two. I'm going to get some more. Now, here is the next critical step for doing filigree, which is to repowder or add additional powder to your wafer. So I have turned it upside down so the rough side is up. Here's why we don't care about that roughness, because we are going to go over this. And you may remember the last time when I was talking about sifting, I said, don't do this when you sift. You can do this now. Because you want to put a lot of powder on. Now, you also want to make sure you have something underneath to reclaim, because there will be more powder on this paper when I'm done than there will be on the wafer, and you don't want to waste that. So make sure you have a clean piece of paper to reclaim that. And you are going to go, and you will notice that it starts to get a little peak, and you get to a point where no more powder will go on. It just falls off. The height of that pile is determined by something called the angle of repose, and it's also closely related to how freeze and fuse works. But I am now going to take this And I'm going to put this back in the kiln. And when you do that, let's see, let me go ahead and get this powder out of the way first. There is an important step in shelf preparation to make this work right. So let me get rid of this. You can see there's a lot of powder here that I do not want to throw out. So make sure you've got nice, clean. Wipe these, I use a piece of cardstock. Take a paper towel, wipe it down between different colors, especially if you're switching between two colors that are reactive.
What size flower frog would be best? Can you repeat the question?
Yeah. So someone asked what size flower frog would be best. This one I think is, I don't have a ruler handy. It looks like about maybe 3 inches across, 2.5. That works great. Anything about that size. I have used these two for this size for the pieces that come out of the powder printer. These both have worked really well. So here is the critical step in shelf preparation. You pretty much always want a freshly kiln washed shelf for this next step. Don't reuse a shelf because you're going to take your hand and the heel of your hand or the ball of your hand, depending what, but that part here, and you're going to very gently go over it like this a couple times. Now, I've already done that on this one, so you wouldn't be able to see it anyway. But when you do that, you get a light layer, uneven, but that's okay, of loose kiln wash. Now, this polishing is something we do a lot of times when we want to make the backside of our glass really smooth. You can polish a shelf, get out the hairs, get out the scratches, and you'll get nice, smooth glass on the back. But normally, you would go and vacuum off that dust. Here you want to leave it because what happens is that dust acts, each little particle of dust acts like little ball bearings, because we are going to put this back in. And in my kilns, this would go back in, and I will put, the tutorial for this, or the instructions, is already online. If you go to any of the Filigree stencils, there's a link at the beginning of the stencil description to that, or if you go into the learning section, and the schedules are there. But the process temperature for this is 1425 for 5 minutes. And what happens is the powder settles down. What you end up with is significantly less than 6 millimeters of height. And as you all know, surface tension takes over, and that's where the 6 millimeter rule comes from. So the reason it goes from this to this is because it draws up. And so when you put this in, fire it to 1425 for 5 minutes, this comes out obviously flat, but then can be slumped. Yeah, questions?
Will instructions be on the website?
Yes, so the question is, will instructions be on the website? They are on there now. And tell you what, before we go, I will bring up the website and I will show you the stencils that we have, as well as for this technique, and I will show you exactly where those instructions are. So all of this information is there along with the schedules, the full schedules. More questions?
I don't have a kiln in-house. Do I need this hairspray this to go to my community kiln?
So the question is, I don't have a kiln in my house. How would I travel with this? Could I use hairspray? You might be able to use hairspray. I'll tell you what I would recommend is you're going to need to take, I don't know if you're doing powder wafers now with hairspray, but once that powder wafer is fired and you have, I would just do it. It only takes a second. I would do it at your community kiln if there's a place to work. Bring your powder. And if they don't like, I've heard some community places don't like people working with powder, take it out outside in the sidewalk or something. I mean, because it's real. You saw how fast it was. Once you've cold worked that wafer, it just takes a few seconds to pile on, and I wouldn't want to travel far with that. So I would do that where the kiln is.
Okay. Can you just
Can you sift kiln wash powder on a shelf? You probably can. I haven't done that. You just want it to be really, really light. You don't want this to sit in a bed of kiln wash because that might do the opposite of what you want. But yeah, you should probably it would probably be just one tap on your sifter is all you'd need.
Is there a larger stencil?
So, question is there a larger stencil for larger pieces? We're going to get to that in a little bit. So hold that question, but we will answer it.
Any plans to do a square version?
So any plans to do a square version? Yeah, there's all kinds of different designs we want to do. These take a little more testing when we sell them for this purpose. And I'm going to show you, again, in a little bit, along with the question of larger pieces, there's actually some flexibility here where you can make designs where you don't even have exactly the stencils you want, but we're going to get to that. Other questions?
Only a washed shelf, no kiln paper?
No, you never do this kind of stuff. I strongly recommend against doing it on shelf paper. When you're putting just powder down, the powder gets, the shelf paper, with shelf paper, the paper breaks down into little particles, and even papyrus, which has a little more body, still has that little particulate stuff, tends to get mixed up in the powder. Now, when you're working with a wafer, here's a wafer that's been fired. When you're working with a wafer, this is less susceptible to getting mixed up, but this is going to shrink. These shrink, it varies a lot based on the design and the ratio of open space to closed. But I will tell you that they, on average, tend to shrink about 25%. And when you shrink something like that much on shelf paper, it crumples up the shelf paper and it's going to get into your project. So I would only do this on kiln wash. Other questions? That's it for questions. Okay. So again, if you have questions, go ahead and put them in the chat. And let's see what we got. So now, you notice on this one, let me move this out of the way. Second to zoom in a little bit more. All right, so hopefully you can see this has got multicolors. There's a couple of ways to do this. I did this at this stage. I just went here and now sifted some other powder, but you can make these flat and then go back and re-sift powder on them and refire them to color them. You'll also notice, when I started doing this, because this was all experimental in the beginning, there's that magic brown color, because I was just doing them with that. But when that came out, I covered it with a different color, and I really like the effect because you get around the edges different colors. So doing one color for the wafer and then covering it with another color works well. Or you might want to, let me grab another piece. Here's one, and you can see it's got some really nice coloring on it. This was done with the wafers, and we wanted to maintain the back design of the wafer, but we wanted it on front. You remember, let me go ahead and dump off this powder.
What about zip?
Someone asked, what about zip? I haven't used zip. Zip probably works fine. In fact, zip because zip is a lubricant, you probably with zip wouldn't even need to worry about polishing the shelf. I wouldn't do it. I would just do it right on the zip.
Is there any cold working prior to this one?
No, there was no cold working prior to this lump. They come out all nice and fire polished. Neat. So here we've got that wafer again, and you can see, if I hold it at a bit of an angle, hopefully you can see there's a lot of texture here, and you want that to be facing up when you put the powder on, because you want to fill in that unevenness. You can see there's like gaps where the things overlap. So this has to be up when you put the powder on. But in this case, this is one where Angela really wanted, this was her powder wafers, and she really didn't want to cover this with more powder. So what we did is we put it in, we took it, and I put the powder on the side we normally would, which would have left this as the back. But then I put it in and I just barely tack fused that stack of powder on there so that I could flip the whole thing over for the filigree firing. Yeah, question?
Can you fuse the filigree to a clear round piece of glass if you want to make a dish without a hole?
So the question is, can you fuse a filigree to a piece of glass if you want it to be without holes? And you absolutely can. That's how this was done. This was, again, was a multicolor, the wafer. So with this particular ring, when it was a filigree, we tack fused the powder onto the back so that the multicolor wafer, what we did on this one is another flip stencil. And so we did one color on the first round, and then when we flipped the stencil, we did another color. So you can see some of these, or they alternate what colors they are. And we wanted to keep that. So we put that with the design down, sifted the powder over, tack fused the powder over, and then flipped it over to do the full filigree firing. And then we used that on a bowl. So you absolutely can use these. They don't have to be done. You know, I like these little bowls, but this is loads more things that you can do with this than just little teeny open hole bowls. You can absolutely do that. You're going to see we've got designs to make pieces where you can decorate a larger piece. They're not all little circles of kind of finished designs. We have components as well, you're going to see. Any others? All right. So let's see where we are. And when you do this, I just want to mention, you can either do it like here. I've done it as a tack fuse or actually as a contour fuse. I really like the relief, but you could full fuse these in too, so you could put in designs and still have a nice flat bowl. Talked about that, talked about adding colors, and I think that is it, except for the question of bigger pieces or squares or things. So someone asked what colors I'm using now. The only real color I have taken out and used, this is burnt orange. The other one was that magic brown, there's my magic brown.
And then you just use burnt orange, right?
Yeah, I just used burnt orange for that one, and I was gonna, when I covered it, I used the same color. I could have used a second color and got in that two-tone effect.
What did you use for the second color on the blue one?
So the back is mostly magic brown. You can actually see that. Remember, this was the rings and the spokes. So the rings were done in magic brown. The spokes were done in blue. I can't give you a blue color because this is my magic blue. It's where I mix all my oversifted blues that can't go back in the original jars. So it's just some combination. It's pretty close to an Egyptian, maybe a little bit darker.
Well, they want to know the colors on that green and blue one.
The green. This one? All right. So the blue is cyan. Yeah, the light blue is cyan.
That's the powder I use.
Yep. And same for the back piece of glass. The dark green looks like jade.
Yeah, it is.
So it's cyan and jade, and then it is on a spring green opalescent back, and which is reactive, but because it was a contour fuse, it's not a dark reaction, but there is a very light reaction around there, which is also kind of a cool effect. And if you, here, let me go grab something. I'll tell you something else. If you're feeling ambitious and want to try, this one?
Yeah.
Is it this one that someone's asking about color? Is it that one?
That's
French
French vanilla, sunset coral, and medium amber.
vanilla, sunset coral, and medium amber. So if you want to do some cool things, you know, if you take this, and if this was reactive, you know, let me flip it over for, you know, if you do a full fuse of a reactive design on a piece of glass, not only do you get the delicacy of the filigree, but then you also will have this fine line tracing around the filigree. So you get a whole lot going on for not a whole lot of work. More questions? Are we good? All right, so I want to talk about making, and we're still working on this, so I don't have instructions yet. There are a couple of things I want to work out, but I will let you know that in addition to shapes and designs like this, and I think there's 6 in that first release of finished bowls, we also have strips and circles and some other shapes. Unfortunately, my favorite shape, I think I broke all of them, but I can grab one that's fired.
Hey, can you set them in a round to create a larger bowl?
Yeah, so someone asked if we can set them in a round. So these are also shapes. This is called, the name of this shape is a vesica piscis, for when you're on Jeopardy. So you can actually take these at the wafer stage and you can build bigger designs and then tack fuse the wafers together tack fuse that in the kiln, and then take this bigger piece, powder it, and make a much larger project. But I will tell you there's some things to be aware of. One is if it is not symmetrical, it may not shrink proportionately. That rubbing the shelf and having it easy to move is important because they do tend to distort. I can show you an example of that. So get rid of this. So as you can see, this is just broke because it wasn't tack fused enough. But you can see what I did here was by tack fusing, I'm making a bigger piece that I can powder. So you're not limited to the size of the powder printer. The issues seem to be the big ones I'm running into right now are distortion. You can see these were all round when they went in. They are not round now. It's a cool shape, but I would like it to be a deliberate shape. I think I have a solution to that, but you're going to have to hold on, and hopefully in the next week I'll be able to post on that. But a lot of the shapes we have are meant not just for bowls, but for design elements and for building. And so let me show you, get this stuff out of the way. Let me show you some of the cool shapes. So that's the same as, where'd it go? Here. That's this one, unslumped. There's that one.
Can you skip the tack fuse and directly put it on a sheet of glass?
Skip which tack fuse? Someone asked if I can skip the tack fuse and put it directly on a sheet of glass, but I'm not sure which tack fuse they're talking about. If you're talking about this tack fuse to put the wafers together, no, you can't put them on a piece of glass because once it's fused to glass, it can't draw up to make the filigree design. So these are some designs that are out there now. And then I'm pretty excited about. Give me 1 second to grab these. is there is a set of rings. There are these. We're going to have more of this stuff coming out, but you can see this is looking like little pendants or earrings because they're pretty lightweight. And then there's another set of rings, which is basically 4 large and 4 small. So these are also just really fun design elements for projects. And then we have these, which are like little glass bars. Right here. And you get a whole bunch of those. So they're somewhere between a rod and a ribbon, but shorter. Well, you can make them longer by tack fusing a bunch in the end. And then I love these guys. You can see these are pretty tough.
How sturdy are the filigree?
Someone asked how sturdy are the filigree. Can you all hear that? So this is, this is as sturdy, at least as sturdy as a sheet of glass at this point. Once you get them after the powder wafers, not so much. But the filigree are pretty tough. They're as tough as any other piece of glass. And then we get these. So, you could make a bigger bowl and do all kinds of cool decoration with these and choose whether you want to have them in relief or flat on the surface. That may be, when we're done, I'm gonna show how we do the, Val, who's on the stream right now, had a question about a particular stencil, so I'll do that afterwards. And let me show you, I'm gonna flip over to the website just to show you real quick where the instructions are, the easiest way to get to them. So we're gonna go ahead and so here's everybody's favorite website. And if you go to, probably the easiest way to get them, go to stencils. You will notice that the newest stencil, but there is also, ooh, I'm going to get 15% off. Cool. You can't, oh, you know what? Hold on. There we go. Let me go back to the home page again. Sorry about that. So go to stencils. You can see there's the newest ones listed, but there's also, oh, I haven't added, there's going to be a filigree category, or I hadn't added them. Right now you need to get them through the new. But you can see here are all the designs. But if you pick any one of these, you will notice it says a stencil is intended for the glass powder filigree. Click here. And here's all the stuff we went over. There's your schedules. There you go. Any questions about anything we've covered? Because that's what I got today. All right. Folks, and think about if you got questions. And everybody is welcome to stay on for this. I'm going to grab the peace sign. Move this stuff out of the way. Oh.
Do some colors pull up more to make a fine line?
Yeah, different colors because they have different melting temperatures. There are going to be slight differences in how much they pull up. The question was, would different colors pull up different amounts? No, if you want a finer line deliberately, don't go as tall on the powder. That's kind of, I had this one out. This was from not having enough powder. If you can, white against white, not the best. You can, if you go lower on the powder, you can vary your line thickness a little bit. I haven't noticed, it was one of my concerns, I have not really noticed an issue of different powders not working well together or having to adjust the schedule so far. You will almost certainly have to fine tune the schedules for your kiln. Uh-huh.
Can you use the other stencils to create other filigree designs, or will they distort too much?
I have not, they asked, can we use other stencils for the filigree designs, ones that we already have out there? There are probably some that will work, interestingly, especially some of your shapes. I have not gone through. We are now at, I want to say, just over 350 stencil choices. I have not gone through them to look what else may be suitable. I will, so that when that filigree category is there, if there are any other ones that would work well, they will automatically get pulled up when you go to the filigree. But keep in mind too that powder wafers are pretty easy to break. And if you want to break them fairly precisely, you can take, excuse me, I'll just use this for a straight edge. If you take that needle, the needle file, you can see how cleanly that broke right where I wanted it to. So it's really easy to cut these specifically. And crazy secret, they actually cut amazingly well on a tile saw. You would think they would blow up, but they don't. So you can take existing designs, make pieces, and put them back together and make stuff that, even though you're using a powder printer and you're using stencils, nobody's else will ever look like yours. Yes.
What's the difference between the filigree and the powder wafers?
So powder wafer,
That's the question.
what? The question was, what's the difference between the filigree and the powder wafer? And it's the stage of the product. So this is the powder wafer. This is what we are referring to as the filigree, which is the drawn up powder wafer where it has gotten thicker, sturdier, and narrower. You can see, that's the shrinkage right there. So there is significant shrinkage.
And it's the firing.
What?
Make it different.
Yeah, and it's the firing, it's the combination of its different firing schedules, and to go from this to this, I have to add a lot more powder. It's not just firing the wafers, it's taking the wafers and then adding that piled up powder and refiring it to get to this.
Where is the sort of order on
So the square spacer is not online yet. We are going to put it up and we will send out an email when it's available. It'll be sometime next week. But if you order any stencils or powder printer before it goes online, we will include the new spacer for free. We'll just throw it in the package.
Do transparents pull up more?
Do transparents pull up more? I haven't seen that. I've played somewhat with them. Honestly, I'm not sure. Like I said, I expected more of a difference in colors that I'm getting. So I'm optimistic that the transparents won't be a huge deal. But sometimes you can offset that too by backing the transparent. Transparent powders, when they fuse together, they typically end up fairly opalescent anyway because of all the air that gets trapped. So if you really want the color, you might want to look for a complementary, not complementary, but a similar color in opalescent to put in the back, in which case what I would do is I would do, I might take this, which is 147, deep cobalt blue, and I could now pile up the deep royal blue or a different color blue on top of this to use a transparent color. And I don't know that it would change the results a whole lot, but because the structure underneath is opalescent, it would probably minimize any differences between opaque and transparent glasses.
Somebody wanted to see a picture of the completed piece sign. So.
Oh, okay. So here is the stencil that we're being asked about. Here are some examples of it finished. This, by the way, so here's the other thing. You could do filigree with this, but you're probably going to have to play a lot with the schedule and figure it out, because you will notice all of the designs that we have out now are based on a 3/8 inch thickness, because that's what was working well and consistently. This, it's kind of cool looking. This is much narrower. So will it work? Yes. But you're going to again have to play with it to make it work. But you could probably make really cool little peace signs with that. I'm going to try it. Like I said, I'm going to go through all the designs.
Here's a question. What about kiln washed fiber paper to fire on?
What about kiln washed fiber paper to fire on? I wouldn't, because again, it's rough and you need something. Even with the kiln wash, it's not a smooth, flat surface. So you've got little teeny dents. The glass is going to slump into those little dents, and then when it tries to contract, it's going to get stuck and trapped, and it won't be able to. So rather than contract, it's going to thin out in the middle, and it'll distort. Kiln wash is your friend, guys. You really, really want to try to get used to using kiln wash on shelves for as much of what you fire as possible. You get better results almost universally. You get less of it. It's a lower expense. And if you learn how to do it right, in fact, there's a video, I think, on our YouTube channel. I'm not sure if it's shared, but if it's not, I will. Where I had a beginner class, I made the comment that I can scrape a full-size shelf in about 15 seconds. And they were like, show me. So I made a video showing them. It's not really that hard, but one of the things you want to avoid doing is so you kiln wash a shelf, you fire it. Do not add more kiln wash to that shelf, because if you kiln wash over fired primer, for reasons I don't understand, it becomes 1,000 times harder to scrape off the shelf. But if it's your original kiln washing, you fire it however many times you fire it, and then you scrape it, it comes right off. So.
Where did you get the container for storage?
Where did I get the container for storage?
That little plastic thing?
That is from, it's I think it's either Sterlite or the other guys, or no, it's Iris, I believe. And they make these containers, which are meant originally for photographs, but we use them for wafers, and it works we use them for a bunch of things. They work real well. And I know that when I bought mine, Michael's had one of their big sales on them, and I got them for a really good price. All right, let's make some peace signs. So this is one of the stencils where you have to put over an existing one. So you're going to want to use the spacer. That's key. We're going to put that down. And I'll use something that will show up nicely. I'll use some nice green. Find here's my sifter. Now I need to use this one, but again, I need a spacer because I do not want to squish what's there.
Do you need to stilt the kiln shop for filigree firing?
What was that?
You need to stilt the kiln shop for filigree firing.
Stilt?
Yeah, raise it.
So the question is, do you need to raise the shelf for filigree firing? And the answer is you always raise your shelf no matter what you're firing. And I know that there are kiln companies that sell fiber kilns that tell you you don't need to, and you can fire right on the floor of the kiln. And for what it's worth, I think that they are wrong.
But like, do you need to stilt the little shelves?
Oh, do you need to stilt the little shelf? No, the little shelves, I fire with little shelves right on the big ones all the time. That's not a problem. But I will tell you, because powder wafers, you know, there's a real temptation to go full speed on these because the powder doesn't care. But those little shelves will thermal shock if you go faster than 500 degrees or if you crash cool if you cool your kiln too quickly down as it gets close to room temperature.
What size is the shelf?
The shelves are 6 inches square. They're the same ones that come with the powder printer and that we sell on the site. So, there you go. Now, let's say, you know, this still has a little bit of unevenness. What you can do with these is fire them, take them, put them on a frog, sift powder over. You don't have to go as high as with the filigree. But if you put powder over it and then refire it according to the same powder wafer schedule, you can build up a much thicker, sturdier powder wafer, and you can even out the little lines where the connectors are. Any other questions? Anything else people want to see while you got us online? No?
No more questions.
No more questions. All right, then we are going to call it. I want to thank you for being here. And thank Angela for...
Wait, can you re-explain the spacer?
Oh, re-explain the spacer, yes. So this, hold on, let me grab my, here. So there's the spacer. It is basically just an opening that's a little bit bigger than any of the designs that we offer. And what it does, you know, it was kind of an afterthought once we released the powder printer, but then we started including the squares because it became so important to so many things that we do. But what it lets you do is raise up a stencil just a millimeter off the shelf so that if you have, and I'm going to show you what would happen. So if I were to go and add this stencil without a spacer, right? I don't know if you can see in the camera, but I just squished, I lost my clean edges, things spread out a little bit. Whereas if you put a spacer, you can set down a second stencil on top and not touch the powder that's down there so you don't, I mean, you can see now when I put, you know, it's pushed outside the design. It lets you go higher with your powder too. So I use it for multi-part stencils where I don't want to disturb the first part. But the other thing I do sometimes, even for a really simple stencil, let me grab something that will work here. So this is the flip stencil for that set of rings, right? There's one way, do it the other way. I've now got whole rings. I'm just going to do, let's say I want to make a bunch of semicircles. I'm going to go ahead and
Somebody asked about how we use silver powder on the filigree. Do you want my bill?
yeah.
I polished it. I was lazy.
So if you've use the powder printer, you know you get to a point where you can't go any higher than the stencil. Unless you put a spacer. I can even put the same stencil back, and I can keep sifting. So now, I know there's no way to show it because I'd have to tilt the shelf, but I've got a much thicker stencil. I mean, a thicker powder layer here, you know, and you can go put down 2 spacers. And I can keep within reason, keep building up. So they're super handy. You get to a point where it just gets too tall and things will start to collapse. But it's a great way for 2-part stencils where one part of the stencil sits on top of the other, that existing design, or for just when you want to make your wafer designs a little bit thicker. But again, what I often do, if I want a thicker wafer, I make a regular wafer. And then...
Do you ever use 2 spacers?
Yeah, that's what I just showed. The question is, do I ever use 2 spacers? And the answer is yes, sometimes I do, not often. Usually what I prefer to do is this same technique of sifting over, but I don't go high. So let's say I just want to make this a little bit thicker, or I want to make the back a different color. Two-sided wafers are cool, and sandwiched wafers are cool too. But I can just go just like that, not a lot. But now I can put this back in the kiln, do another wafer firing, and I've made my I've made my wafer thicker and stronger. If you do that, do the cold working first, because as they get thicker, they're harder to cold work. But you'll notice, if I real quick clean this up, now if I sift, my sifted design is going to be that same neat edge. Someone asked if we've used, Angela does a lot of work with the silver powder. If you took the fossil vitriol class, you're familiar with it. Asked if she'd done or we had done with silver. Angela has done this piece. She has not yet polished the silver in the middle, but you can see the really cool reactions. This was actually sunflower yellow behind it, so it's gorgeous what's going on behind it. And we will get this polished up and we'll get a picture posted. So yes, she made the filigree and then tack fused it. You painted it and then tack?
I painted it, then we put it on top of it.
Yeah, she painted the silver and then we set it on top of the glass and tack fused it on using the same schedule that fired the silver, tack fused it on, and so now it's on there. Slumped it because you always want to do your polishing after the last firing. And that's where we are now, is ready to go ahead and polish.
Somebody wants to know what the actual sizes of these ornaments are.
So someone was asking about actual size of ornaments. It's actually right there on the label and in the website. If I go back to there, let's go back. If you go to any wafer on the site and you just go down to there, you can see what the sizes of the wafers are. Every single wafer is on this backdrop. And in fact, let's see. Yeah, so so they're all there. And the wafers, the filigree may not, I don't know if you can see it on this screen, but there's actually a grid behind everything too. It's a very light grid and every square is a 1/4 inch. So someone was asking specifically about what sizes these are. This one here, the biggest it can be is 5.5. So that looks like that's 5 inches across. These all look like they are, let's see, about 2 1/4 across. Keep in mind that wafers, that's the size when you sift. Wafers shrink a little bit when you fire them.
What COE powder are the schedules for?
The schedules I have provided are for bullseye glass. They're going to be very close to what Oceanside System 96 is. Honestly, the difference between bullseye and Oceanside is probably going to be no more than the difference between what I provided and what your kiln actually is. So everybody's going to need to do a few quick tests to figure out the best results. You will know that it's not hot enough for the filigree firing if it comes out and your edges aren't smooth, if it still looks kind of lumpy or uneven, and you know that it is fired too long if it has drawn up. Eventually, if you fire any of these long enough, you're going to end up with a blob in the kiln because they will continue to draw towards the middle. So you want to figure out where you need to stop that the surface tension from pulling up to get just the right results in your kiln. Like I said, in our kiln that we've been doing the firing, which is one of the Paragon CS26s, but even we've got 2 of those and they aren't exactly the same.
The website's still on the screen.
Thanks. The schedule we found for doing the filigree that's been working perfectly in the kiln over my left shoulder, which is a pretty standard kiln. That one tends to fire. It's the one I've done all the ebooks in. If you know if you've ever used any of the ebooks and you know how to adjust from those schedules, you're going to find a similar adjustment for this.
They want to know what painted it with silver means and how to polish it. What do you say? Polish.
So the question is what do I mean by paint with silver and polish it? That unfortunately is too long a topic for me to cover completely here, but we can probably schedule something or yeah, maybe we'll do a live show. It's something. It's the short answer is, if you are familiar with Angela's work, she does kintsugi glass. It is inspired from the Japanese art form of kintsugi, but she does her own take on it in glass, and she uses real fine silver that we get in a powdered format that can be mixed with the medium and painted on and polished and stuff. We did it in fossil vitro, which is why some folks know about it. We are going to get the information out there. We just haven't had a chance to put together something cohesive on it yet. Any other questions?
Oh, what is the difference between the ebook powder wafer and the powder wafer machine?
So there is an ebook, Powder Wafer Design Elements, that talks about how to make just the general technique of powder wafers. Powder wafers are not something we invented. I learned them over 20 years ago from Bob Leatherbarrow. I don't know if Bob Leatherbarrow invented powder wafers, but he's the first person I ever heard it from, and I haven't found anyone who did it before him. And he built his art practice around a lot of his work with the crackle. Started with powder wafers. So that book isn't on crackle, but it's on the basic powder wafer technique. The powder printer is a device and a system that lets you make powder wafers that were previously not practical to make beforehand, because doing a lot of our designs are multiple color, close color registration, and trying to do that without a device to align things and without something that makes it much easier to lift a stencil off. Any of you who've ever worked with stencils know that the hardest part about stenciling powder is getting the stencil off after you've stenciled the powder. And so the whole design of the powder printer, when we set out and we made it, there were a couple of very specific things that we set out to do. One of them was we wanted to do multicolor registration, so you could do multicolor stencils, which required a method for precisely putting down and lifting up stencils in the exact same position. So much so that you can sift half of this with one color, lift it up, tap off that, go back, go the other side with the other color, and you'll get one wafer with both colors. And because you can take it off and tap, you don't mix color powders either, so you don't waste any. But it was also to make it so that, I know, so I'm 62, and I will tell you that my hands are not as steady as they used to be. And when I taught full time, I had a lot of customers come through who shaking hands was a problem. And so lifting a stencil when your hands aren't still is really tough. So this makes it easy because with one finger you can lift it off. And now if I move a little, it doesn't matter because I'm off. So this is a device that makes it much easier to make powder wafers you probably could not make otherwise. Whereas the powder wafer ebook is just a general, it's how to make powder wafers, how to cut your own stencils, things like that.
Are there any specials for Filigree?
No, we don't have any specials this weekend for ordering. Like I said, yeah. So there's the special that you'll get the free spacer, and the other thing is we worked real hard to make sure, of the I think 11 stencils we released, 10 of them are single $12 stencils, and only one of them is a 2 stencil set. So all of these, it's to be able to make one of these if you've already got a powder wafer, if you already got a powder printer, to make any of these, the stencil's $12. Any more?
No.
All right. Thank you all so much for joining. We'll try this again. And again, thank you for being here. Sorry about last night for all of you, and we had a really good crowd show tonight. Thanks for thanks for coming, and thank you so much for Angela, who keeps me on track and tells me what people are asking and throws things at me when I need to switch attention.
I'm the helper.
We are going to get this. I'm going to work on getting this up, the video from this up ASAP. And if you have any questions about any of this, as always, help@fusingfactory.com, and we'll get back to you.
Thank you so much for being here.
You'll have a great rest of the weekend. Bye-bye.
Bye.